Hello and welcome to At the Corner of Business and Spirit. I'm your host, Carl Ricketts, with my co-hosts,
Candice Ricketts.
And we are excited to begin a new season of At the Corner of Business and Spirit. Today we have probably a hot topic, probably one of the most relevant issues of the day, and that is the topic of immigration. We have a wonderful guest with us today, and we have none other than my dear friend, attorney Carla Casas. And she is an immigration lawyer who serves in a few areas. I'm going to ask attorney Carla Casas to just introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Carla, and let the people know what you do and how you help people.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you guys this morning. I'm attorney Carla Casas. I specifically focus on immigration law. I've had my practice, Casas Immigration, for the last 10 years. And we focus specifically on family-based immigration, humanitarian cases, individuals who've been victims of crimes, abuse. And then I also represent people in the immigration court, people who are in deportation proceedings. I'm a proud immigrant myself. I immigrated from Peru when I was 4 years old with my family.
Yes.
And I went through the process myself. I've been through all the steps. I became a citizen in my 20s. And so I get it on a very personal level. I've been practicing law over 20 years. So the first decade I worked in big law. I did corporate law. I also worked for the federal government. I was a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Labor for 5 years, got some great trial experience. But in the end, I came full circle to where it all began for me. This is the most, to me, I have never felt more useful than I do now, especially in light of the current climate with regard to immigrants. And so I'm very passionate about immigration law. And I've got two offices, one in Chicago and one in Orlando. I'm a native of Florida. I grew up in Florida. And so I was very excited to be able to bring services to the Orlando area. So I travel back and forth. Right now I'm actually in Chicago because I have a deportation hearing on Monday. So I'll be representing a client in the Chicago Immigration Court, but we are in both cities at this point.
And listen, I felt that God inspired me to reach out to you, Carla, when I saw what was happening in the country. And when you shared your story with me, and how passionate you were and what you were doing currently, and my wife being an immigrant, myself being a child of immigrants, and you being an immigrant, and I'm so grateful that you are giving us the time today to discuss probably one of the most important topics, most relevant topics to the immigrant community that we are facing and witnessing. And we're so grateful that you are bringing your expertise to this arena. Carla, I want to just start off by asking you a question. What is happening in the field of immigration right now? What's happening to the people? What's happening in the legal system from your vantage point? Just what is happening for people that maybe don't know what's going on? What is happening?
So let me just start with the biggest issue on everyone that you're seeing all over the news right now is this individual, Mr. Abrego. It's Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This is the Venezuelan man. Well, actually, no, he's from El Salvador. And he was deported with a group of migrants, which included a lot of Venezuelans. And they were all taken to El Salvador. So right now there's been this individual, Mr. Abrego Garcia, there was a court order that basically stated of all countries, he cannot be sent back to El Salvador. He is from El Salvador, but he came here and sought asylum. He was fleeing from the gangs. He did not win his asylum case because asylum is very tricky and you have to file within 1 year of having arrived in the country, and he did not do that. However, he was granted what's called withholding of removal. And that's where the government says, okay, you didn't win your asylum claim, but you did convince us that if we were to deport you back to your country, you may be killed, you may be tortured. So that is the one place where you cannot be deported to. And that is exactly where the Trump administration sent him. They've said, well, it was a clerical error, administrative error, but now they're refusing basically to bring him back. And so that is of huge concern because there's a concern not just with him but with all of the other Venezuelan immigrants who were sent to El Salvador, because none of them have had a chance to appear in court and be able to respond to any allegations. Typically the process is, and this is what I do in immigration court, I represent clients who are in deportation proceedings. So we have regulations that apply to this, right? If you are claiming that someone should not be here and they should be deported, there's a whole process, due process. They get a chance to appear in court and prove if there's some avenue for relief. And the Trump administration has kind of bypassed all of that, and they're saying, well, nope, we're just going to send all these people to Venezuela because we feel they're gang members. We feel they are members of Tren de Aragua, which is the gang, the Venezuelan gang. It's a very dangerous gang. No one is arguing that. But the problem here is that none of these individuals have had a chance to appear in court. And the Trump administration is doing this based on things like certain tattoos that they have, a certain jersey, Bulls
Yeah,
jersey.
I've seen that.
I mean, it's, a lot of this has now been out in public. Like there's a list, which if you look at that list, you're like, a lot of people could qualify for that, have nothing to do with Tren de Aragua.
Hmm.
So it's concerning on a very deep level because it goes to the heart of due process in this country. And that is a constitutional right that everybody has, not just US citizens. Any person in this country has a right to some level of due process. So I would say that's the biggest thing going on right now that's captured all the attention.
Yeah, it's fascinating, as you mentioned, that this gentleman Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I mean, I cannot imagine what it would be like to be sent out of a country, away from your family, away from your locale, and then trying to manage your rights, and not being afforded due process. What I'm noticing, and then Candice, I'll let you chime in. What I'm noticing is that this individual, has, how do I put it? He's in the court of public opinion. It appears, and listen, everybody has issues, everybody has challenges, everybody has faults, but what appears to be happening is a smear campaign, that is being utilized to kind of tell the citizens of America, or people in America, that this gentleman, is not worth due process. Am I off with that, Carla, or am I
No,
accurate with that?
that is absolutely correct. I mean, right now, what we're seeing in the media is even the Attorney General of the United States is misconstruing the facts. I mean, she's gone out there to say two courts have found that this man is a gang member of the gang. That is completely incorrect. That is not what happened. That what he had was a bond hearing, and in a bond hearing, the immigration court basically decides there's three things you have to prove: that you're not a flight risk, that you are not a danger to society, and that you have some avenue for relief. The standard is very low in terms of the judge has a lot of discretion to decide. And so that's where there were allegations made by one individual that he was a member of the gang. And so the judge basically said, okay, you know what? I can't prove that he's not. So for now, I'm denying the bond. He's going to remain in custody while he fights his case. Like he still had a right to due process in that situation. That bond denial was appealed to the district court, in federal court, and the higher court is not going to second guess the judge's discretion. He's the one that got to see the individual he heard. So the higher court said, we're gonna stick with that decision. There was at no point that a bond hearing is not a criminal hearing. There's no determination of guilt. It's basically just, do you get released or not? And that's all there was. So that is what Attorney General of the United States was referring to when she says two courts found that he's a gang member. Completely incorrect. But at this point, I think a lot of it, they want the conversation to end with, he's illegal, he's got no rights. So why are we even discussing
Yes,
this? I mean,
yes.
that's really what it comes down to at this point.
That's why it keeps coming up every time the question is asked. Like, why are we still talking about this? Why don't we move on
Mhm.
to more important things? And they're using things like, oh, he's not just wearing any bull's hat, he's wearing a specific bull's hat, and the bull's horns are something, a sign for the devil. And they're talking about his wife, there's some kind of domestic abuse situation, and she's come out and made a statement in regards to that and said, they were in counseling, working through things. So
Mhm.
what they're talking about is completely unfounded. So he is being tried and convicted. in the media. You're absolutely right. And this is just
And not in the
smear
courts.
campaign, not in the court.
Right.
Just so they can justify their actions and be like, oh, it doesn't matter that he was snatched up and just exported. I know, Carla, I've heard a lot of different things about when he was actually, I would say, kidnapped at this point, taken.
Yeah.
He was actually on his way to a citizenship hearing or some kind of an immigration.
I think he was, I think in this, I'll have to double check, but I'm not citizenship, but I think he was, he had been checking in with ICE on a yearly basis for years, right? Because when the court granted him withholding of removal, that doesn't really give you any specific status. It basically just says, you know, we can't send you back to El Salvador. Technically, they could have maybe decided to deport him somewhere else. And that, you know, there's issues with that too. You just can't send people randomly to random countries or steps that need to be taken. But of all countries, El Salvador was the country he was not. The order was very clear. We do not send him back there because he did prove that he would be in danger. So after that, he basically was doing yearly check-ins with ICE, you know, where they want to make sure you've not been arrested, you're not, you know, because if that had happened, yes, they could have probably revoked that. There's a process for that too, in terms of revoking this order. And so I believe he was going to his check-in, and that's where a lot of people are being snatched up as well, right? Other individuals who are doing check-ins with ICE, and, you know, they don't even notify the attorneys. I've had colleagues who've had clients disappear. I had recently heard from another colleague, I forget what state she's in, but they were preparing for the deportation hearing, which is part of the due process, you know, part of all of this, right? Where you get to present your case. And he was they took him to El Salvador. He never got to appear. I think the hearing was like on a Monday, and whatever, you know, the week before he disappeared. The attorney didn't know where he was. And I think he might've been one of those people where the family members saw video of him in El Secot in El Salvador. And that's how they were like, wait, that's him. He's over there. I mean, it's just craziness. I don't know another way to describe this. We have never seen this before.
So this has to be setting some type of a precedent that, you know, as no matter what immigration status we're in, we could be citizens and I mean, we could be revoked. And I mean, I've heard those kind of terms being talked about in the media, that no one is really safe. So, you know, what kind of rights do we have in situations like these?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the main things I want to clarify, you know, that again, there's so many misconceptions, is there are constitutional rights that apply to everybody in this country. And again, this is the issue we're seeing, where this administration is trying to differentiate. Well, let's not worry about this guy because he was a gang member, he was this, he was that, so we don't have to give him due process. And that is incorrect, right? The Constitution talks about, Fifth Amendment in particular, states that any person will not be deprived of their life, liberty, or land without due process of law. We can't just jail people based on allegations. And if that were to happen, we're all in trouble, because either we believe in due process or we don't believe in due process, right?
And Carla, you're saying that applies to all people.
Absolutely. The Constitution says person. It does not say citizen. It does not say green card holder. It says person. It could not be clear. There's no other way to interpret that. Any person within the confines of our country, within our jurisdiction, which makes sense, because if you think about it, if we're going to start saying only certain people have due process, right? Illegals do not. And I don't use the term illegal. I'm just using what other people say, right? Undocumented individuals do not. Well, then what stops your neighbor, for example, who's upset with you, who's upset with me, right? I'm brown. What if I don't speak English that well? They call ICE and say, hey, Carla's illegal. She's a gang member. ICE comes looking for me. If based on that, and they're going to believe them, because now that's what we have, is they're doing it based on allegations, right? They're making decisions based on allegations. If I have no right to due process, how do I prove that I'm a citizen? I don't get the hearing to be able to prove that, because they're immediately going to snatch me up and take me to El Salvador. And there are people that are really at high risk for that. I have clients who don't speak English that well, but they are citizens, because our law does provide for that. If you have had a green card for over 15 years and you're over a certain age, you can take the test in Spanish or in your language, right? And so I have individuals who are naturalized US citizens who are not fluent, maybe, you know, or they speak, but obviously if the police comes, they're going to get nervous and then you can't speak that well.
Yeah.
I think, I think those individuals would be at high risk of being taken to El Salvador if the
Yeah.
neighbor calls or whoever's upset with them and says this person's an illegal, and they're a gang member. This is what we've got.
And that's what we're in danger of. It's kind of like when everyone was being accused of being a communist and then people were being snatched up and rounded up and just we're going through this weird time of I there's no real law or precedent. It's just because we're not basing our decisions on facts. It's just, oh, what I think and what I
There,
feel,
there's
what
a
my
real law.
emotions.
There's a real law,
Yeah.
but it's just that
It's
it's not
not
being
being
adhered to.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
just like, oh, this person who I believe their word because they look a certain way.
Right.
I'm gonna go with what they say, and then that's gonna be it.
So I've been watching in the news. People are being sent to Panama. People have been sent to other countries, and even in talking with you, in when you were considering to come on our podcast, when I asked you and you graciously said yes, I know that you've even highlighted that people are being taken from the cities in which they live and
Hmm.
being placed in other locales, and it
Yes.
makes it even harder for them to, once
Oh,
your life is totally
yes.
disheveled. Tell us a little bit about that,
Yeah.
and how challenging that is for a human being
Mhm.
to fight for their rights when they have totally been displaced.
Absolutely. So that actually happened to one of my clients like about a couple months ago when this all first started and they started doing a lot of the raids in Chicago, immigration raids. I did have a client who he was driving with his brother, and they were stopped by, he thought it was the regular police, but it was actually ICE. They detained him, didn't ask him anything. I mean, they did it based on how he looked, right? They looked at him, pulled him out of the car, said,
Wow.
we're taking you into custody. Didn't even give him a chance. He was undocumented, but the police never, or not police, the ICE never asked him. So, regardless, he was taken into custody. He was in Chicago, not Chicago, because actually in Illinois, there's no more detention centers. So, usually it's Indiana, the surrounding states. But then a couple days later, he was sent to Louisiana. There's a detention center in Louisiana. And he didn't even know where he was, number one, because they don't even tell you, right? They just move you. We're moving you to a different state. And
Wow.
this, obviously, he's never been there. He doesn't have any family there. Nobody who can come visit him, right? He's from Chicago. In his case, he was very lucky that his wife had the funds to be able to hire me, an attorney. And so once I realized where he was, I got in contact with the detention center. How do I set up a call? Because every detention center is different. They all have different protocols. How does an attorney even get in contact with them? But I mean, he not, and he had a lot of other people there with him who did not have family support, who had no one who's going to be able to hire an attorney to locate where he is and try to get a bond hearing scheduled. I mean, it makes it incredibly difficult when you don't speak the language. Now you're in a different state. You're even further away from your family. Fortunately, I got him released. So we filed a motion for bond because that's the next step when you get detained by immigration. Ideally, if you can have an attorney file a bond motion for you, and then the court it took a couple weeks to get the bond hearing scheduled. So I always tell clients, like, unfortunately, a lot of clients think that maybe I can just show up there and get them released. No, our process is complicated. They have to wait, they have to be patient. But eventually we got the hearing scheduled. And the hearing is where we have to prove, as I mentioned before with Abrego, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that's the hearing that he had where they claim he was found to be a gang member. No, the focus of that hearing is, are you a flight risk? Are you going to come back to court? Basically, are you a danger to society? And
Mm.
so we were able to get him released. He had no criminal history. There were no allegations of anything. So we got him released, but he was released in Louisiana. And of course, ICE isn't going to bring you back home. Like, no, they're like, well, good luck. Find a way to get back home. So fortunately, again, his wife was able, we coordinated, we got a plane ticket. There was actually a wonderful nonprofit organization who helped out with that. They were on the ground and they went and we, put him in contact with them and they helped get him to the airport. But he was very lucky. He had a lot of other
Wow.
people there who he mentioned. He's like, I felt so bad for them. They don't have that support and they're in a state they've never been in. So all the odds are stacked against you. I mean, that's
Wow.
the line.
That's interesting that you mentioned the Louisiana Detention Center because I think that's been a place where they've been sending. I remember
Yes.
that coming up several times with the students and
Yes.
the protests. and
Yeah.
fight in the state of New York or New Jersey or something for not having extradition there. And so it's just really, really interesting that they're sending them into the South. They're taking them from the Northeast
Yeah.
and sending them into the South.
Well, and it's very intentional because now
Yes.
they're in a more conservative federal
Right,
circuit,
right, right.
right? And so
Yes.
any appeal that you,
Highlight, please highlight that.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's very strategic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of
They
course.
want to
Yeah.
get them in the Fifth Circuit. They want to get them in a conservative court because it's just, yeah, when you look at it, it's like, wow, how, I don't know. And this is why, as hard, and I'll be honest, it has been stressful. Immigration law has become even more stressful the last, since Trump inauguration. Clients are stressed, everyone's stressed. And there are days when I'm like, I don't know if I can do this for 4 years. It's just like, but at the same time, I cannot bear to think about abandoning my clients because then they're like, then what are they supposed to do? I'm
Yeah.
like the only hope that they're like, are you going to be with me till the end? Yes, I will be with you till the end, no matter what the result
Wow.
is.
Uh,
Um, but
we
it's
thank we thank you, Carla, for your willingness to stay with people and I believe there's a principle in the Bible. It's called Philoxenia,
Mhm,
and many people can be friends of people who vibe with them, people who are cool with them, people who think like them, people who look like them. It's easy to be friends with people who are in your locale. The the good book, the Bible, challenges us to perform this act of philoxenia, which
mhm,
is not just being a friend of best friends, but it actually requires us to be a friend of strangers.
mhm,
And in this Greek combination, you get friend of strangers, and then in the English is translated to a word called hospitality.
mhm.
And so way back in the old days, people had to actually, as they practiced this, not that they had to, they graciously practiced it, that as strangers came into their town, as they were traveling, as they were migrating through, as they were moving through, you had individuals who would graciously welcome them into their homes so that they could have safety and food and protection. And this concept is a principle that still is required of us as Christians. We'll get you back to the regularly scheduled program. For those of you who want to continue the conversation on justice, I've written an 84-day devotional entitled 12 Weeks of Justice. This devotional will allow you to dive deep into justice from a biblical perspective and allow you to have resources, information, and insight on how you can live justice on a daily basis. It's available on Amazon.com. And we also have this book available on our platform for the love of culture.com. We have more resources. My dear wife has written a wonderful year-long devotional. If you want to enhance your faith and deepen your love, Resilient Faith, Radical Love is for you. This devotional book is available on Amazon.com and also on our platform for the love of culture.com. Check out these resources. I have no doubt they will be a blessing to you, and may these resources change your life. We now take you back to the regularly scheduled program already in progress. To befriend those who are strangers, to care for those who are within our gates, to care for those who are within our areas of living. And if we're looking at what's happening today, it seems to be that we're distancing ourselves away from how we care for, as what some would say, the non-citizen, the one who does not have the U.S. passport or the U.S. License or what, not license but
$5 million gold card.
credentials. Yeah.
Right.
So it just seems like we are we're distancing ourselves away from this concept,
Yes.
which is a critical concept when we talk about Christianity.
Mhm.
And let's just be honest with the proliferation of so many ideologies, whether it be white Christian nationalism, there's so many ideologies out there that are stripping away the very fibers of how if America says it wants to be a nation that espouses the love of God,
Hmm.
this just seems to be a very challenge that we are not able to care appropriately for those who are moving, migrating, coming to this country. I take this seriously because my parents had the opportunity to come to this country. And I thank God that they had the opportunity to gain citizenship.
Hmm.
That afforded me the opportunity to be born here, first on my dad's side, third on my mom's side. It afforded my wife the ability to come to this.
As a child with my family, and I was able to follow the process, the due process, and
Hmm.
eventually become a citizen in my 20s, you know,
Hmm.
and build a successful life here. And I feel like
Yeah.
there should be that should be a pathway for everyone, you know.
Hmm.
And there there's so many with so much angst around immigration and everyone's status right now. I'm sure there are also like fraudulent services and a lot of scams popping up.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
can people protect
Well,
themselves?
yeah.
Like,
Is there a clear path
yeah,
to like what is the path now? Because it
Yeah.
just seems like it's being buried.
or
And
blown up.
Yeah.
yeah, and I know someone who actually 2 weeks ago had
Hmm.
to leave the country.
Hmm.
So what is the path? What is it?
So, immigration, you can think of it as there's three primary paths, right? One of the first one would be family-based immigration. And but then it gets a little more complicated because it's not just any family member, right? US citizens can petition for their spouse, their parent, their siblings, and their parents. Legal permanent residents, it's a smaller group, but family is one of the biggest ways to immigrate. But there is a process for that. And for some people, the people who have come in without permission, and then if they have a US citizen child, it's still difficult for them to be able to gain status because our laws are very complex and also strict with certain requirements. And so that's why there are a lot of people who have been here 20, 30, 40 years, and they still don't have any sort of immigration status. They're not a legal permanent resident. They're not a citizen. So I would say that's one of the biggest misconceptions I hear as well. I've had people comment on, I do a lot of, social media. I have a TikTok, Facebook, all that. I do a lot of information. And I've had people comment, well, your client has been here 30 years. Why didn't they become a citizen? That's their own fault. I'm like, okay, they didn't do it
Wow.
because there's no path. You don't think that if they
Mm,
had a path that they wouldn't become a citizen. But
mm.
anyway, family is one of the main routes. Then we also have employment. That's another area. That is also becoming much more difficult, right? But typically that requires you to have, an advanced degree, and they're becoming very competitive in terms of who can qualify for certain visas, like the H-1B is
Right.
one of the professional visas. So employment is another area. And then the third, it would be the humanitarian, for example, asylum, withholding of removal, which is what Kilmar was granted. Also, we, like in my practice, we do a lot of U visas, which is for victim of a crime, an immigrant who came in the country and was a victim of a crime here in the US. It's not all crimes. There's a list of qualifying crimes, but
Mm-hmm.
we've had a lot of people who are domestic violence is one of the, crimes, robbery, things like that. They can apply for a U visa if they have cooperated with the police, like say they filed a police report, and if there was any investigation, they were asked for information, they provided it, that we can apply for a U visa, which eventually leads them to a green card, which can then lead them to become a citizen. So it's a long path.
Okay.
Not fast, it's not easy, but we have handled many of those cases in my office, and we have gotten them to green card. There's also for trafficking victims, there's a T visa. So there's an area of humanitarian visas. But I will say our immigration system is complicated. It is complicated. And when you mention fraud, I do want to mention we have a big problem in the immigrant community, notaries. So notaries are practicing
Yes. Talk
law.
about that, Carla,
Yes.
please.
I think one of the reason they're able to do this in Latin America, un notario is also a lawyer. Like they have further studies. It's not the same as a notary here. In the US, to become a notary, you don't have to have you don't have to have a high school diploma. In Illinois, at least, every state is a little bit different, but in Illinois, the requirements are you can't have any felonies. You have to have been living in the state for at least 30 days. You have to be either a green card holder or a citizen. And that's basically it. Those are the requirements. So these individuals are out there preparing immigration forms. But, to me, it's not, they're like, well, we're just preparing the forms. You can't separate the two. Preparing the forms, but is that person even eligible for this benefit? Are they going to end up in deportation proceedings because you're filing this? How risky is it? You can't separate it. It's not just filling out the forms. You need legal advice, and it's a complicated
Yes.
area of law.
Muy
So
difícil, muy difícil.
yes. I mean, I've seen so many cases botched by a notary. And unfortunately, sometimes you can't fix it. I've seen people deported because a notary filed something that they were not eligible for. Or maybe they had like a criminal conviction that, that was problematic and they should have waited, or they shouldn't, and they end up getting deported because of that. So that is definitely one of the biggest issues that we have is notary fraud.
You
Because
go no, you all can tell
they make
car,
people
car,
believe that they know what they're doing, but they don't, legally they don't.
Carla knows her stuff. She just covered so many things that I was about to ask.
Mhm.
And thank you for teeing that up, Candice. I mean, she knows her stuff, and for everybody out there who is going through a process of immigration, trying to gain citizenship in this country, make sure you're talking to the right
Yeah.
people. Make sure you're talking to someone who can take you down the path through even though it's challenging right now.
Mhm.
People like Carla, and I'm gonna put her information back up on the screen so that if anybody has any questions, they can learn a little bit from her. But we need people to connect with immigration lawyers, people
Mhm.
who can help you. Um, Carlos, and maybe you're aware of this. It was interesting. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he was sharing with me that in the United States, funding was pulled within the country for a program that allowed immigration lawyers to care for or to represent children. Um,
Yes.
and it was then overturned. They were told they were laid off.
Mhm.
Immigration lawyers were laid off,
Mhm.
and then they actually put them back on for a determined period of time. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but as I'm even thinking about this, that children cannot receive um, proper representation, when we know that there are many rights that protect children.
Mhm.
The most vulnerable.
I don't know if you can speak
Yeah,
to this in any way, shape, or form.
sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things is immigration court proceeding is civil. It is not criminal, right? So the right constitutional right to have an attorney represent you does not apply in immigration court, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult. So basically, it says
Wow.
you can find your own attorney, and you can certainly, like, for example, I have clients who will appear to their first hearing. Maybe they're trying to gather the funds to be able to hire me. And so I will tell them, you can go to the first hearing on your own and ask the judge for more time to hire counsel, and the judge will give you more time. The judges do not want people representing themselves because that's more work for them. They're going to have to
Yeah.
explain all these things, right? So they're like, go get yourself a lawyer. But the government does not pay for that lawyer. Different than in criminal proceedings, right? If you can't afford a lawyer, you have a constitutional right and they have to provide you a public defender. That is not the case in immigration. So there were several nonprofits. One of them is called Kind Kids in Need of Defense. And I know that one in particular because I actually inherited one of their clients because they had to fire everybody. So one of my current clients, his son was being represented by them. And so, fortunately, he was able to retain us, and now we're going to continue with his case. But it is absolutely heartbreaking because his attorney called me, and I could hear the pain in his voice. He was like, we've suffered catastrophic funding. I'm not going to be able to represent him anymore. Let me know where to send you the file. But he's been working with this child who's 13
Yeah.
for the last 4 years, and they've got him a benefit. But now we need to continue the case, and he still is in court. He's got to appear in court, and it's heartbreaking to think of all the other children who have lost their attorney, and most of them can't afford to hire. That's why they were working with a nonprofit, because they're, like you said, they're the most vulnerable. Like, some of them are literally
Yeah.
alone in this country,
Yes.
and it's evil. There's no
What
other
kinds of
way to
issues?
express that, you know?
So what the kids? Yeah, that is. I mean, as a mom, I just it makes me angry. Um, what kinds of issues are these kids um having to face, and why do they need an attorney?
Yeah, I mean, so first, a lot of these kids have entered some of them on their own, they're fleeing all sorts of, violent gang violence in a lot of Central American countries and Mexico and,
Mhm.
the cartels. There's all sorts of reasons why, you know, the fact that some of these parents, it must be that bad that they say to the kids, try to get to the US
Yeah.
because they know that there is
Yeah.
no hope wherever they are. I mean, that tells you kind of how desperate the
And
situation might
and
be.
Carla, not to cut you off,
Yeah.
that is real
Hmm.
for a parent that
Yes.
wants their child to have a future, to have a hope. That's a very human issue. And I'll
Hmm.
say this, even growing up in New York,
Hmm.
um, with the war on drugs that was taking place, and as homicides were growing in increasing in number in New York, in the late 80s and early 90s. I remember my mom, who was an immigrant to this country, said, "It's time to go. Like,
Yeah.
we have to get out of this place." And we moved to another place because she was concerned what would happen in the next few years of my
Mhm.
children's life. So yeah, what you're
Yeah.
saying is so valid.
I mean, that is a basic as a parent. I mean, I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews and I love them as if they were my kids. And I can just imagine if you have to make that decision, it's got to be bad, right?
Oh
If you're
yeah.
Challenging.
I want you to survive. But and the thing is, a lot of these kids, so the kids that do come in by themselves, they're unaccompanied children, a lot of them would have a way to get a green card. It's called special immigrant juvenile status. It's under, created by Congress, but they can't do that on their own. I mean, it's a process, right? So this is what these nonprofits, Kind in particular, Kids in Need of Defense, that's what they're helping with, right? To be able to get these individuals a green card because there is a process. But a child, I mean, they're done if they're not going to have any help. And the judge can't do it for them as much as a judge might want to help, but the judge is impartial. Like the judge has to say, what defense do you have? If you don't have any, well, I'm going to have to order you deported.
You
And
said
Yeah.
special juvenile immigration status.
yeah, SIJS is Special Immigrant Juvenile Status.
Special immigrant juvenile status.
You know what?
Wow.
Let
Do
me
the
actually
kids just get
confirm that that's what it is because
deported?
now I'm blinking out for a second. SIJS. It is SIJS, but let me make sure. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, correct. So that is a way for them to get to a green card, right? First, we file that form. It's the form I-360. But again, this is complicated. It's not something a child can do on their own. They need representation. And again, there's a lot of great judges that are very compassionate, but they're the judge. They can't do that for the child. So they'll try to say, is there any way we can get you counsel? Is there any nonprofit? But now those options are slimming down because they're running out of funds, right? The budgets are being cut. And so these organizations are having to operate on bare bones. Like the one that I mentioned right now, I think they have just somebody answering the phone. They're trying to move all the cases out, but the attorneys have been laid off. There's no more money to pay them. And it's heartbreaking because yeah, these are kids, little kids in some cases, little,
Yeah. Yeah.
toddlers. So yeah, it's difficult to even think about that.
Carla, thank you so much for what you have shared thus far. I think what you have done today is to help us to see uh, the what's happening in the arena of immigration. It's challenging when people, and this can be in any industry within the United States. When we're thinking of immigration, if the term, like you said, illegals is
Mhm.
thrown out there, people automatically default to saying, "Well, is it the law? Are they breaking the law?" And what you have even highlighted today is that there are laws that protect
Yes.
how immigrants need should be treated. and
Mhm.
and many times we're not having that conversation, which preempts any feeling or notion that someone is illegal.
Mhm.
And I think what you are saying, and even why we have immigration law, is because people's rights need to
Yeah,
be protected, because
exactly.
There is a constitution that says they have rights. And what we're facing today is, to just be succinct about it,
Hmm.
is an administration that is challenging the very laws of the Constitution, the very values of the spirit of the
Yeah.
Constitution, and also making it challenging for immigration law to even be practiced, and also in a calculated manner trying to seek out districts
Hmm.
of court where conservative law is practiced, that they know would be in favor of deportation and actually devaluing
Hmm.
people's rights. Am I off with this, Carla? I
No,
mean, please let.
dead on. I mean, it's a multifaceted attack. They're
Yeah.
coming at it from all sorts of directions, from all different angles. And I love the fact that you said this is the reason we have immigration laws. You are 100% correct. That is the point of the Immigration Nationality Act. It lays out the steps that need to be taken. Yes, there is a way to deport people who should not be here, but there are steps. It's called due process. We're back to the, and I mean, really, if we look at it, it really comes down to that. First of all, why would we even have immigration laws if the fact that you're illegal is enough and we're done? There's no more, the questions stop right there. No, that's not how it works.
Wow, wow.
And it's interesting because I think this was it this morning when I was reading some articles overnight. I don't know if it was last night or the night before. The Supreme Court did a ruling that
Mhm.
basically said that they couldn't do any more deportation, so that
Mhm.
there was a bus on the way to the border in
Yes.
case that had to turn around. I was
Yes.
like, this is interesting. So
Yeah.
now the Supreme Court is stepping in. Who else is going to step up? Because we have three branches of government, and we're
Hmm.
supposed to have checks and balances. And it feels
Hmm.
like for the last 4 months, we've only had one branch of government just dictating what should happen, and everybody else standing back and be
Right.
like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's keep doing that. So at what point will someone step up and be like, no, we have a checks and balance
Yeah.
for a reason, and let's start putting those in place.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I mean,
hopefully we're starting to see that.
yeah, that's the one thing that I'm like, I still have hope. We still have a court, and there's some reasonable people on there, reasonable judges. And this order that you mentioned was issued like in the middle of the night because
Right.
they were trying to be sneaky. The Trump
Exactly.
administration was trying to, let's get them out of here. But the court issued an order
Ooh.
in the middle of it, like, I don't know, 1 in the morning or something crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. They were like, stop.
Carla, can we stop all the backroom deals, the middle of the night
No,
rulings,
it's crazy.
all of these things that are meant to keep people off guard, and
Yeah.
to, I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm so glad that we have people who are vigilant, such
Mhm.
as yourself, and there are so many people who are advocating for the rights of everyone, every human. When I think about um, God is not a person who views um, uh, people by nationality,
Mhm.
or he and trust me, I love the beauty of nationality. I love the beauty of culture, such as Peru. We have
Mhm.
Machu Picchu. We
Yeah.
have Jamaica. We have, yes, yeah, we have Dunn's River Falls. We
Yeah.
have Malawi, and I went to Malawi. We have Lake Malawi, and the culture in every place is rich and beautiful. But before we even are identified as people from a place, or where we were born,
Mhm.
God views us as His children, no matter where we are. And it's
Absolutely.
it's so important for us to love and care for people no matter where they come from, because once we start getting into this notion of valuing one person over another based
Mhm.
on where they come from, we get into a dangerous game that many would say, that's a little bit prejudicial.
Mhm.
That's a little bit, in Espanol, racista. It's a
Mhm.
little bit it's a little bit discriminatory. And I think we want to make sure that in our government, as Candice, you were highlighting, checks and balances, that we are making sure that there are checks and balances, that we're not just letting these things happen, and we're watching these things happen. And if we don't voice our concern, if we're not teaching people what their rights are,
Mhm.
if we're not seeking the subject matter experts such as yourself, Carla, on this matter to make sure that people's rights are protected, we're going to have some dire consequences. And
Mhm.
I like how you said you have hope
Mhm.
because there's a court system.
Yes.
There are laws that are in place, and I have hope because I believe that people who truly love God are going to stand up and say, "Hey, this can't happen." like I'm not going to allow this to continue.
Mhm.
And hopefully we can have many people who will speak and voice truth and speak truth to power,
Yes.
because in this day and age it is needed. And I love that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'm encouraged to see that there are people starting to speak up, even people that I wouldn't expect, people that voted for Trump, but they're like, "Whoa, wait a minute. This is getting too far." And it's encouraging to see that. There's a lot of good people out there. A lot of times they're misinformed, but that's why information is so important. Knowledge is power. And I focus a lot on know your rights stuff. I do a lot of know your rights workshops. Especially right after the election, I did several in Chicago public schools and churches. And in
Awesome.
TikTok, I'm constantly making videos on TikTok, informational videos. But to me, because I remember what it was like when we immigrated with my family in the 80s. There was no information out there. My parents were
Yeah.
truly clueless. They had no I remember my mom would say, well, we don't, we got to be careful. We don't have any rights here because we're undocumented. Like they had no idea about their rights. And I think it's so great
Ooh.
that we have platforms now, right? Where we can, on TikTok, people can, I mean, I make a ton of know your rights stuff. I'm always like, look, these are your rights.
Yes,
This is
on
what
YouTube, on
you do.
Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Yeah,
Yeah.
you everybody can put their stuff out there, like you said,
Yes.
Carla. Oh yeah,
And
Yes.
I think that that's so important because um, we don't live in a vacuum
Mhm.
anymore. Like the more information that we can put out there, the more people can learn.
Mhm.
And that's so great that you're able to do that. Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
you know what? I feel like I don't know. I never forget like where I came from, right? I'm an immigrant. I will always
Right.
be an immigrant. I mean, I'm a US citizen, but
Right.
I was born in Peru. I immigrated.
yes,
I was undocumented for a large part of my life. And I will never take for granted. Like
that's
I am
right.
so fortunate to be where I'm at. Had I not gained status, I wouldn't be a lawyer. I mean, I don't know what I'd be doing, but I would not be a lawyer and I wouldn't have two law offices. I can never
That's
forget.
right. That's
Right.
And
right.
You're
I tell my
successful.
clients that I'm
The
like, you see me here
opportunity.
now,
Right.
but I started out where you are and you can get there too. But let's get you solidified here. Let's get things in
Right.
order so that you can continue to build and grow your businesses. I have another thing that I think is a huge misconception. I have a lot of clients in Chicago that have restaurants. They're undocumented, but they are such hard
The
workers and they're
business
doing well
owners
financially.
Contributing
contributing
to
to
Yes,
society.
society,
absolute
the
hiring. They have
fabric, the
employees.
fabric of society, helping to
Absolutely.
to shore up our small
Mhm.
business infrastructure, contributing to the towns, paying taxes
Yeah,
when they don't have rights, and that's not something that gets highlighted often. You're paying
right.
tax and you don't have any rights.
Yeah.
You're still a citizen by that definition.
Mhm.
I love what you're doing, Carla, and I'm hoping that this will not be the only time that we have you on this podcast. We are inviting you to be a regular contributing member of this podcast, and the knowledge that you have, the passion that you have, the compassion and love that you have for
People.
people. Move all the labels aside that are out there. We want people to know, move those labels aside.
Mhm.
We're talking about human beings. We're talking about people.
People that
Um,
God created in His
yeah,
image.
and and so it's important for us to care for
Mhm.
people, to have this spirit of hospitality, to make sure that we are caring for our immigrants, so that they can find a pathway to the
Mhm.
life that God desires for them.
Absolutely.
I'm Carla. I'm so grateful. This has been such an eye-opening
Mhm.
conversation. And before we wrap up,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to immigrants who feel lost or discouraged about their legal status. And you know, we would love to hear from your perspective
Yeah.
on this matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, any immigrants out there who are still trying to gain status, don't lose hope. Don't assume that there's no avenue for you. Talk to an experienced immigration attorney. I can tell you that I have this over the last 10 years now. There are so many clients that came to me and were like, I don't think there's any chance. And as we do that, I do a very thorough consultation. I ask them a million questions because it's all relevant. And there's been so many times when something comes up that they were not aware of at all, right? Some avenue for them to be able to get a green card. So I think, with all this happening, I know people are scared, people are worried, but I think the first thing is finding a good immigration attorney who you can trust. Make sure they're an attorney, make sure you're not going to a notary. But I think it's a time right now to see what your options are. Right? If there's an avenue for you to get on, consider getting on that avenue with an attorney you can trust. And even I've had clients who come to me and in the end, there's nothing we can do right now, but I make sure that they understand, look, this is the plan. If ICE comes to your door, you don't need to open your door unless they have an order signed by a judge. You have a right to protect your home. And they hardly ever have an order signed by a judge. So, you don't have to sign anything. You don't have to tell them anything. I mean, there's basic things that I think people need to know, even if there is no avenue for them right now, but to prepare for if something happens, and then if somebody is placed in removal proceedings, most people that have been here a long time, that have been here several years, have a right to appear in front of a judge and fight their case. There's a few limited exceptions, like if somebody's already been ordered deported and then they came back in the country, that's trickier. But the majority of people do have a way to fight their case. A lot of them can do what's called cancellation of removal, which is based on if you have U.S. citizen children and you've been here at least 10 years and you can show hardship. I mean, there are definitely several things we can do in immigration court, but it's important for people not to sign away their rights because ICE will blatantly lie to them and tell them, sign this and we'll let you out faster. That is not true. So things like that, I think, are really important to kind of be prepared. And so, again, speaking to an experienced immigration attorney, I think is the first thing I would do if I was an immigrant right now, an undocumented immigrant. I want to get all my ducks in a row and have a plan in place. Don't let this administration make you feel like, oh, it's all done. There's no more. That's not true. We have laws still. We have avenues to be able to get a green card. You do have to do it more cautiously because they're being aggressive about certain things, but there are avenues, there are paths. He has not changed the Immigration Nationality Act. Trump does not have the power to do that, although he would like people to believe that. He has not done that. So we still have so many avenues for people to be able to get there. And I think it's important to inform yourself. Now is the time. Right? If there was ever a time, I think now is a time to get informed. So don't lose hope. That would be my biggest thing to people out there who are still wanting to hopefully reach that American dream.
Wow, powerful.
Don't lose hope.
Don't
That's
lose
Mhm.
hope.
That's a great thing to
And we are here
I
to help you. I stick with my clients from beginning to end, no matter what that end is. I always tell them, I'm not going to leave you. Like, I am here until we get to that the final goal, and even if it's something we didn't want, I will still be here to advise you on appeal rights. What other options do we have? The plan is so important. You got to have a plan.
don't lose hope. You gotta have a plan. Don't lose hope. We want to thank you, Attorney Carla Casas, and we definitely will have you back. We are hoping that this issue will be resolved in the near future, but it's going to take people like you to help us to eradicate this issue in this lack of care and love and respect for people that we're seeing
Yes.
in these days. Candice, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, or man,
don't lose hope.
yeah, she did a mic drop on that one. She did a mic drop on that one.
Well, listen,
Um,
thank you so much for having me. Listen, you don't have to twist my arm. I love talking about him. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I
oh
love.
yes,
I love it. I love it.
I mean, I do.
It's awesome that
I'm
you
very passionate about it because
you
I
found
lived
your
it.
lane. Yeah,
You know,
same,
yes,
I've
same,
lived
yes.
it,
same.
so I know it on a personal level.
And I'm telling you, what powerful contributions, what powerful testimonies have come from the immigrants to this country, and also let's be real about it, people who were forced to be in this country,
Mm,
who were brought over against their will
yes.
and have contributed to the beauty of this country. We want to make sure that their lives are highlighted, that they are valued, and we want to make sure that that anyone who is trying to uh, be a contributing member to our society, that their rights are totally known.
Mhm.
And we are so grateful that you have come and have shed a light on all of these rights. Man, powerful, Carla. Well, that's it for today's episode of At the Corner of Business and Spirit. If you found this conversation helpful, make sure to subscribe. We want to make sure that you can subscribe on YouTube. You can find our podcast on Spotify. You can find it on other platforms, Amazon Music. And please subscribe and rate us. Give us a positive rating. Share the episode with anyone who might benefit from it. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and please take care. We love you. We're so grateful that you were able to be a part of this podcast. May God bless you richly.